We're going to pick up in Luke 19 today. It's a story of Zacchaeus. Now, if you grew up in church or you went to Sunday school, you probably remember the story. Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he, right? This is the story that we're going to talk about today. So it starts in Luke 19, verse 1. It says, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. We're going to come back to that here in just a second. Verse 3, it says, Zacchaeus wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he couldn't see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree in order to see Jesus, because Jesus was coming that way. All right, let's pause right here for just a second. Because the thing that the Bible gives us some really important information that sometimes we would just kind of gloss over. See, in this day, just like today, governments, the way that governments ran and the way that you would run the government was the government would collect taxes on people. And in this case, Rome, who was, at the time, basically occupying the planet. They were occupying most of the known world at the time. They would do the exact same thing. They had to pay for the Roman government, and so they would tax people in these territories that they had occupied and taken over as their own. And Israel was one of those territories. But the way they would do this, see, Rome, they didn't want to send their own people to handle this. And so what they would do is they would find citizens of these countries or these territories that they were occupying, and they would say, hey, listen, we know that you're one of these people, but here's the deal. We need 10% of the tax, right? If you will collect taxes, we need 10%. I'm just throwing that out as a rough number, right? We need 10%, but you can collect as much as you want from people. If you want to collect 60%, 70%, all we need is 10, you can keep the rest. And so these tax collectors, they were essentially being paid for or bought off to betray their own people, to oppress their own people, to steal from their own people. All of that went on with the protection of the Roman government. So the Roman government would protect them. And so they were stealing from their own people and being protected by this foreign occupying army to make it all possible. And it wasn't like it wasn't like the Ponzi scheme was invented in modern times. Like it existed here too. And what we see here is that Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector, which meant that he'd been doing this for a while, and he was in charge of a handful of tax collectors. And just like pyramid schemes, right? He had people working underneath him, and they would funnel him a little bit of their money, and he would funnel them. He would then make money off of them, and it just works just like it does today, right? He was a chief tax collector, and it says that he was wealthy. Which means that every time that people would walk it by, they would walk through the neighborhood, right? And they would see Zacchaeus' house, his big house with all of his stuff, with all of his possessions. They would know every time that house, his possessions, his presence was just a reminder of his betrayal and how he had turned on his own people and was getting wealthy off the oppression of his own people. And so people hated tax collectors. And people hated Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector, even more. And so in this moment, you got to think this dude is so desperate to see Jesus that he climbs up into a tree, right? At this point in time, he's putting his life on the line, because as much as people hated him, climbing up into a tree, man, there ain't no place to run when you're up in a tree. And so people could have easily said, hey, that's an easy target, right? Zacchaeus is up in a tree, let's get him. So he's putting his life on the line. Why? Because he wants to see Jesus. Now, I'm reading between the lines here, but I have to think that somewhere in Zacchaeus' mind, as he looked at all of his wealth and looked at all of his possessions, he realized, no matter how much I put in my checking account, no matter what I put in my garage, right? No matter what I have in my living room, no matter how big my house may be, it doesn't buy me peace. Like, this can't pay for peace. And I have to think that Zacchaeus probably didn't have any peace. When he put his head on his pillow at night, I think he probably had a hard time sleeping, because as he's living in this luxury, he's looking around at all the oppression of the people around him. And this has been his life. I mean, he's been doing this for a while. Chief tax collectors, they don't just happen like that. He'd been doing this for a long time. And so Zacchaeus was a guy who his past was full of shame and shame and shame because of what he's been doing. And I think he got to a point where, again, this is just me. This is my own commentary. I think he got to a point where he just said, man, I can't take this anymore. This doesn't, I can't buy peace. And I thought that I could. And so when he hears that Jesus is coming, he says, well, why don't I give that a shot? And in his desperation, he's willing to put his life on the line just to see, just to catch a glimpse of Jesus. So let's pick back up in verse 5. It says, when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So it says, Zacchaeus, he came down at once and welcomed Jesus gladly. I mean, I have to think Jesus, he is 100% man, just like us, right? Jesus is a human, just like us. And I think Jesus sees a little dude in a tree. He's going to go check that out, right? I'm going to go see who that is. And I'm sure he knew, well, this is the guy, right? This is the guy that everybody hates. This is the guy that has been stealing from his people. And he says, Zacchaeus, come down right now. I got to stay at your house today. I'm coming to hang out with you today. And then in verse 7, it said, all the people saw this and then began to mutter, he's gone to be the guest of a sinner. And then you kind of picture, for me at least, I picture Jesus and Zacchaeus walking into Zacchaeus' house, his big, fancy house. And Zacchaeus looking at Jesus in verse 8 and saying, here's what I'm willing to do today. I'm willing to make this right. I'm going to give half of my possessions to the poor. Everything that I've accumulated over years and years and years of stealing, I'm going to give half of that to the poor. And if I've cheated anybody out of anything, which, by the way, it wasn't just anybody, it was everybody. All the people I've cheated, I'm going to pay back 4 times that amount. So Zacchaeus in this moment is willing to zero out his massive checking account in order to make things right. And that's a desperate move, right? These are bold moves made on Zacchaeus' part. And then I love what Jesus says in verse 9. Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house because this man too is a son of Abraham. And then in verse 10, Jesus says, for the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. So there's something interesting that happens here. If you think back to the story that we told a long time ago about the bleeding woman, right? When Jesus heals this woman who had been sick for years and years and years, over a decade, in that moment when he restores her, he doesn't just restore her physically, but he restores her identity when he calls her daughter. And the same thing happens here in this story. When Jesus says salvation has come to this house today, for this man too is a son of Abraham. See, the Jews in this time, the Hebrew people, they referred to themselves as sons of Abraham or daughters of Abraham or the people of Abraham because they descended from Abraham. And Zacchaeus, he had forfeited his identity a long time ago. He had given up his identity to basically stab his own people in the back and steal from them. And so not only in this point does Zacchaeus make things right. Zacchaeus, again, he's willing to, it is more valuable to him to be right, to be righteous, to be made whole again, to have real peace than it is to have a massive checking account and all this stuff. So he says, listen, here, half my stuff, I'm giving it away right now. And my checking account, I'm going to zero that sucker out in order to be able to pay back everybody in this area that I've cheated. I'm willing to do that. But see, Jesus takes it one step further. Jesus says, listen, this man too is a son of Abraham. So Jesus not only in this point goes to Zacchaeus and says, hey, salvation has come to you today, right? Your soul, that thing that we talked about on Monday that matters most, right? That is taken care of. But in addition to that, I'm going to restore your identity because you're a son of Abraham. That would have been a huge deal for somebody like Zacchaeus. And Jesus, I'm sure, heard all the people mutter, why is he going to hang out with this person? Why is he going to, can you believe he's going to his house? And Jesus hears this and he speaks up and says, let me tell you why I'm here. Let me tell you the whole point of my mission here on earth. And that is to seek and save those who have gotten lost. And I think for us, one of the things we say here at Adventure is that we believe that no one is too far gone or too messy or too broken that God would give up on you. And I think we see the proof of that in this story, that Jesus didn't just come to, happen into people that were lost or maybe as I'm on the way, I'll bump into someone who's lost. No, Jesus said, I came to seek those who are lost. And so today, I don't know what you're dealing with today. I know in the wake of all of this stuff, that I know that emotions and patience and all that kind of stuff is wearing pretty thin as we go through what we're going through, as our nation, as our world is hurting over this virus and how it's affecting people and economy and all that kind of stuff. That won't stop Jesus from seeking you. And I hope you know that today, that Jesus still looks for people like us who may have wandered off the path and may feel like, man, there's no way I could ever get back. My challenge for you today is this, to seek Jesus just like Zacchaeus did, to look for Jesus just like Zacchaeus did, and to maybe even put it all on the line to look for Jesus like Zacchaeus did, but also to know that Jesus is also looking for you. And Jesus is not he's not afraid, nor is he ashamed to be seen with you, which I think is awesome. You know, as Jesus goes to Zacchaeus' house, he's not afraid or he's not ashamed to be seen going into Zacchaeus' house to spend the day with Zacchaeus. Jesus is not afraid or ashamed to be seen with us, people with junk buried in our past, people who may be dealing with situations and circumstances in our present that make us wonder whether or not we have a future. Jesus is not ashamed of being seen with us. Jesus is not ashamed of bringing salvation to us. But again, I think the thing that Jesus would want us to know the most is he's going to restore who we are. He's going to go for the things that matter most. And he's going to restore identities to that thing that we all, where we were all created and intended to be as sons and daughters of the King of the universe. Jesus says, I'm going to restore that. I'm going to fix that because that's the thing that matters the most. And so this morning, Adventure, I hope that this is something that encourages you to know that Jesus still looks for us, that Jesus still seeks us out, and that regardless of what's in your past or regardless of what you're going through in your present or the fear that may be looming over your future, you can still seek after him, that you're essentially looking for each other. Which I think is a really cool thing. So I want to pray for us, and then I got a couple announcements, and then we'll let you go about your day. Jesus, you're good, and this morning we just say thank you for seeking us. We say thank you for saving us, for not being ashamed to be seen with us, to be with us. And so God, I pray, Lord, today that we also would seek you. Lord, maybe in the stress and worry of everything that's been going on in quarantine, our Bibles have sat untouched on our kitchen tables or our counters or a bookshelf. Lord, today may we grab those and open them up and just start looking for you. But know also, Jesus, that you're looking for us. Jesus, may we be found easily like Zacchaeus was. God, may we put ourselves in a position where you can find us, where you can see us. And Jesus, we just say thanks for noticing. Thanks for having eyes to see us and not being ashamed of who we are. Thanks for loving us the way that you do. It's your name we pray. Amen. All right, so hey, a couple things. Don't forget, today we've got a table on the back entrance, outside the back entrance of church, the rear entrance to the main auditorium, where you can drop off your toiletries for J-Town Area Ministries. So that's things like soap, shampoo, toothpaste, toothbrushes, things like that. There's a list on the connections page. You can go grab those toiletries, drop them off any point today. We'll make sure we pull them in by tonight. And so you can do that today as well. And also, for parents, if you've got kids in kids ministry, make sure you check out the reminder video. It's going to be sent out today about how your kids can be involved in Palm Sunday coming up this Sunday. Thanks so much for hanging out with us, and we will see you on Friday.